Hey, my friend, what's up? Are you interested in losing a little bit more weight around your belly or anywhere else on your body? I know there's so many weight loss coaches out there. I know. But my guest today is one of the originals, one of the OGs. He wrote one of the first books on intermittent fasting back in 2006. That seems so long ago. But anyway, he knows what he's talking about. And I would like to bring him on so we can bust a lot of myths and share with you how you can lose the weight and keep it off for a long time, if not permanently. And we bust a lot of myths on this show, including how many fat cells do you have in total? When are they formed? How do you increase the fat cell size and how do you shrink them down? Also, how do you completely kill the fat cells so they're gone, they're out of your body? We also talk about how not to lose muscle while you fast. And this guest has a very interesting fasting protocol that's easy to do. Anybody can do it. And it helps you lose the weight and keep the weight off long term. So stay tuned for an amazing episode. Before we begin, if you're interested in getting thicker, stronger, and fuller hair, then you definitely have to check out fullyvital.com. They've put together an amazing, simple hair growth system that really works, and it's 100% natural. They're creating some really cool science-based ways that you can start to regrow your hair. So check out fullyvital.com, and I'll make sure to include the link down below. Finally, make sure to click the link below to subscribe to this channel so you can get notified when we release new videos. Our goal is to help you look and feel younger so that you can live your most confident and adventurous life. All right. With that said, let's jump right into the interview. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, an OG in the health and fitness industry. His name is Brad Pilon, and he's the author of a fantastic book called Eat, Stop, Eat that basically helped usher in the popularity of the intermittent fasting lifestyle back in 2006. This was way before the current time, as you can imagine. And since Brad has been focusing on health, fitness, and body composition, or the role that these things play in longevity and quality of life, which is important to this podcast, Brad has also recently written the book on heat, which we'll try to get to in the end. I have so many questions for you, Brad. Thanks for doing what you do. And it's so interesting that the work you put out has all these ripple effects. And I heard of you in maybe 2016 or 2017, wow. 10 years after you published the original book, right?
Yeah,
Which seems so, it seems so crazy. So what I want to do is for you as the OG to explain how you got into health and fitness. And I think where you came from into writing your book is also very interesting. So please explain your backstory and what led you into writing your first book.
So my story comes sort of pre-Avengers movies. And for anyone old enough on this to remember, it was from the Incredible Hulk TV series. And there might have been like 2 seasons, and it wasn't Bruce Banner for some reason. It was David Banner, but it was Lou Ferrigno playing the Hulk. And I just remember at a super young age, I think I might have been, quick math, like 7, 8, and you would watch this guy transform into the Hulk, but there was no CGI. That was a dude in makeup. And I found out his name was Lou Ferrigno, and I was just blown away that someone could be that big. And then when you find out that he's a bodybuilder, right? So again, this is back like early Arnold days when there weren't gyms everywhere. And as an 8 or 9-year-old now thinking he made himself look that way. Like he was able to take his body and kind of like an artist with clay, be like, no, I want to shape this thing differently. And he's able to do that. And that idea got me rolling. So from there, I was in the sort of the idea of health nutrition at a very young age. I worked at my local supplement shop at age 15, 16, took that to university, the degree in applied human nutrition, took that into the supplement industry and worked there for 6, 7 years in research and development. Got the bug to go back to school, went back to school to do a grad degree in nutritional sciences. And it was there that I thought I would study sort of the perfect diet, right? Focusing on nutrition, specifically protein and amino acids and the role they have in sort of creating perfect health. And to do so, I wanted to start with a pure baseline, which was all the negative things that happen to you when you don't eat, right? So talk about how not eating is the worst possible thing you could do for your health. And thus, eating is the best thing you can do for your health. And let's make the perfect diet out of that. And what happened was I would start pulling these research studies on fasting, and everyone knew that like if you didn't eat, your metabolism would slow down, you would actually start gaining body fat, and you would just get basically the world's slowest metabolism, and you'd be basically dead, right? Like, you'd just be horrible. Right. And that didn't happen. So I did what any young graduate student would do, is I took that paper, threw it in the garbage. Those people are idiots. And I grabbed another paper. Same thing, garbage, another paper. And all these papers, I'm like, wow, the metabolism doesn't really change that much. How many calories people are burning. They're losing body fat. The markers of what their physiology is doing, all is saying like they're burning fat for fuel. But this is the exact opposite of what we were being told happened. So I had to sort of swallow my pride. We switched gears on my research, and I studied the effects of short-term fasting. So in this case, 12 to 72 hours on human metabolism. And then I focused that down on 24 hours after doing my first 72-hour fast and thinking, there's no way I'm going to get a lot of people to do this, but I could do 24. And then when we divided 24 between 2 days, so if you and I started fasting today at 1:30, we'd fast till tomorrow at 1:30, effectively sleeping through the hard part. I thought, this is doable. Like, people could definitely do this. And then it was just my job to help people understand that it was a good thing to do and not to be so afraid of it. And that's when I sort of jumped into the self-published author realm of the internet.
Wow, those were early days. You had to.
Oh yeah.
You were bucking the norm so much probably that you had to go self-publish at that time, right? Because no self-respected.
Really, yeah, it was very difficult. I learned some interesting lessons about publishing where, if a publishing company has a best-selling author, you, and they have a young author, me, but what I'm saying affects the sales of your book, that's not a good thing, right? There wasn't a lot of people who wanted to touch fasting at all. And it was just about the time where the internet was taking off. You and I talked about this earlier, just right around when people thought, oh, you know what, I'm fine. I'm putting my credit card info online. I'm going to buy something. Just happened to be the same time a friend of mine named Craig Ballantyne, who's gone on to be a giant business self-development guru, was like, dude, just put it online. Like, just take your thesis, write it in a way people understand it, put it online. And I actually got some good advice from some different editors, Men's Health and Men's Fitness at the time, who were like, look, you are not in grad school anymore. You don't need these giant run-on sentences. Cut them down, get to the point. And so Eat Stop Eat started off as just a PDF being sold online. And it was effectively crowdsourced editing, because I would sell the book to you. You would email me back and be like, Brad, great book, except this line makes 0 sense. And I would read it and I go, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm going to need 3 or 4 paragraphs before just to explain what I'm trying to talk about here. And it grew from, 70 pages of font 12 double-spaced Word document to an almost 300-page published book. But it did that sort of organically as people kept buying it, reading it, then coming back to me with questions or complaints or compliments. And the book sort of morphed that way into my research plus the parts that people found it interesting, or the parts people wanted more information on. And that's where we got to. But it was a pretty long road, like you and I said, from published in 2006 to really starting to be accepted as a possible nutritional intervention by, like, I would say 2010, 2011.
Wow. That's like 4 or 5 years of your baby coming into birth, or birthing your baby.
Very slow process.
Yeah. Well, I hope you had a job back then.
I did. I was moonlighting. So I would go to my job during the day, and then I would come home. I would hang out with very, very young kids for a little bit, get them in bed by 7 and right till midnight, like just constant. So yeah, until that time, and all of a sudden you thought, I think I can make a go of this.
Fantastic. So let's get into the book, because I love this topic, by the way. It's something we talked about earlier. It's I don't want to use the term, but it's a pandemic, obesity. Yep. In our society, and it's eating away at our longevity, eating away at livelihoods, and the ability to live an adventurous life and be confident in your life as well. So I know that you touch on a lot of things, and what I love about your book, Brad, by the way, is that you go down, you explain the science simply, you have tons of research that you're pointing to, and then you bust myth after myth after myth after myth. And he's like, the next question that I have, like, yes, he answered it. And the next one, yes, answered. So it's such an easy read that anybody can get it. And so we'll talk about where to get it after. But you talk about 2 things that are essential for losing fat, which is what we're going to talk about for the most of this conversation. It's one is prolonged caloric restriction, and the second one is being in a fasted or fed or fasted state, but preferably in a fasted state at some points. So can you explain those two concepts for the audience?
Yeah. So no matter what diet you're following, no matter how you're approaching health nutrition, you have to accept that if you're losing weight, if weight is leaving your body, then you must be losing more weight than you're gaining, if that makes sense, right? And since the way we gain weight, believe it or not, is mostly by the carbon we eat in our food, right? So a carbon-based life form, fat is 98% carbon. Like it's just weight. So the weight comes in from your food as basically carbon, water, and a couple other elements. And the weight leaves your body mostly through your breath, right? You lose most of your body fat through your breath. And so based on just that simple understanding of sort of mass in, mass out, and for some reason we've chose to measure that in calories, which is the energy in food, but it's almost a proxy for the amount of mass in the food. You have to be eating less than you're losing. Wait. Yes. And so what that means is no matter what diet style you're following, you typically have to be eating a little bit less than you would like to eat if you want to lose weight. Now, the interesting part about that is what we just talked about was carbon, but I didn't say where that carbon came from. And I think most of us can agree we want it to be coming from our body fat. We'd like to lose body fat. We'd like to keep the lean tissue, whether it's muscle or lung, heart, whatever it may keep. We want that stuff.
Yeah.
And so being in a fed or fasted state is literally your physiology being, okay, I have been provided building blocks via the food. So I'm going to make some stuff, right? I'm going to make some muscle. I'm going to make some heart. And then whatever's left over, I'm just going to store it. In a fasted state, there are no building blocks, but you still have to build stuff, right? Your body is still actively repairing and moving things around. So it still needs energy. So thank goodness we've stored some, right? And so in a fasted state, you're drawing from those stores to keep up the processes that keep you alive. In the fed state, you don't have to do that because you just brought in a bunch of energy. So it's very difficult to lose if you're constantly in the fed state. And it's almost impossible not to lose when you're in the fasted state. And what we've found is that the way life is sort of set up these days, we're almost always in the fed state. Right. Like we will eat right up to the point where we go to bed, kind of all day, almost one giant meal with little breaks. And then we'll get a short night's sleep because most of us aren't getting 8 hours. So let's say we're getting 6. The first thing we've been trained to do when we get up is eat the most important meal of the day, which is breakfast, and start the cycle over. So you only have this weird 6 hour, let's be nice and say 7. Let's say people are trying to get a good night's sleep. Yeah. But let's say that meal you had before your bed was fairly large. You're not in the fasted state the minute you're done eating. That food you consumed has to be digested, has to be burnt, has to be used. And then when it's no longer available, you enter the fasted state. That process might take 4 hours. So now you're really fasted for 3? And you start the whole cycle over again. So what we talk about a lot in Eat Stop Eat is just reintroducing the fasted state in your life, right? You don't want to be fasted all the time. That's not a great idea. You just want to maybe look at the balance in your life, fed, being fasted, and purposely just sort of nudge it towards fasted a bit more than otherwise you'd see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so going to that fasted state and you talk about this in the book, is that reduces your caloric intake. Meaning if you're eating all day, then you're just eating calories, right? The carbon's going into your body. And as you start to fast, that carbon reduces. And so you have a chance at losing some of the weight, at being at
just giving your body a chance. And that's the fun part, right? With all of these diets, exercise programs, we act like we're teaching our body something. The truth is your body, since you've been born, actually even before that, has known how to burn fat. It's known how to regulate its weight. You just got to give it a chance. The problem is with today's lifestyle, which is heavily influenced on you being a consumer, i.e. consume my stuff I sell. Right. I need to find more and more creative ways to get you to eat. right? So I need you eating breakfast. I need you eating brunch. I need you lunch, dinner, second dinner. You got to have your pre-bed snack. Otherwise you go catabolic. I need to find more ways to get food into you because you got to pay me for that food. So in that current lifestyle we have, it's very difficult because your body's still going, I can take care of this for you. I know how. Just take a break, go for a walk or something, just stop eating, and I will start doing what I'm supposed to do. But in a world where that's very difficult to do, to actually take a break, it's getting more and more difficult to be like, no, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to skip lunch. I'm not actually hungry. I'm fine. Your body just is in this it's almost a survival mode in itself where you just keep shoving stuff in and your body's going, I need to find places to put this, right? Like I can only put so much in the body fat. I'm going to start putting stuff in your liver, your I don't care, right? Along your linings of your arteries. I just need to put stuff places. And that's where we see this connection between the amount of food we eat and disease states. Right. But if we just took a break every once in a while, let that kind of self-regulate, we could maybe disconnect that association slightly.
Mm-hmm. I want to touch on something that you bring up in the book that I've known for a few years now. And I was very surprised when I learned this, in that we only have a certain number of fat cells. And those, from my research, are formed when we're in our late teens. So your body at some point in your life decides these are the number of fat cells that I've got. And so now gaining weight is just a matter of filling up those fat cells with more adipose or fatty acids that you eat. And then losing that weight is shrinking the fat cells down so they're smaller in size. So is that a fair assumption or statement that you have the number of fat cells that you have, and then you just got to play with that, right? Is that fair?
It should be, but it's not anymore. It's actually, we can push fat cells now to the point where they're so stretched to the max that they will signal for new fat cells to be developed. Wow. But we run back to your problem though. Once those new fat cells are developed, we can shrink them. But it's difficult to get rid of them through interventions that involve nutrition. So when you gain a lot of weight, and it is a lot, you can increase the number of fat cells you have. But using standard nutritional interventions, you can't decrease the number. You can just shrink them. So it is a matter of shrinking growing. There is fantastic new research on therapies that can actually cause apoptosis or the destruction of fat cells. But they are based either on temperature, UV light, or to some extent, eating polyphenols, so fruit. Specific, or not even all polyphenols. Sometimes it's enzymes in fruit like bromelain. But for the most part, yeah, you are shrinking and growing fat cells. And hopefully by, keeping your body weight in check, you are keeping that number fairly constant, right? And then if you've been overweight in your lifetime, you may have more than what you originally had in your teens. But again, outside of some interventions that are really, really groundbreaking, and I think are going to maybe be the future of weight loss because they're non-surgical, the best we can do is shrink and grow, and you're trying to keep them shrunk.
Yeah, that's great. I talk to plastic surgeons as part of the anti-aging protocols and interviews that I do, and they tell me emphatically that the only way to reduce the number of fat cells is to do a liposuction, which actually sucks out the fat cells out of your belly, which a lot of people do. Hopefully not listeners of this podcast, because we all do natural stuff here. But so it's cool to see that there's now new research and new ways that we may be able to reduce the number of fat cells.
Yeah. So they're looking at ways to create apoptosis. So it's a way to kill a fat cell without a major inflammation response or necrosis, right? You don't want slowly dying and decaying cells. You want these cells that have kind of committed suicide in their own. And what we're finding is, what they are finding is there's a couple of ways to do this. One so far has been very, very cold exposure, right? And you're actually, one of the theories is it's actually crystallizing the fat. That one's interesting. It has great research behind it. The process is rather slow. It's somewhat uncomfortable. On the flip side, you can heat fat. And whether it's through UV or infrared, whatever light you use, they're finding a way where they can heat subdermal fat, so the fat under your skin, to a point where for some reason again, that fat decides that, okay, well, I'm no longer needed, or something happens and it slowly dies, and you actually decrease the number of fat cells you have. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's incredibly slow. So if you think about your average person dedicating themselves for a 12-week, 16-week transformation, I mean, the results in that time of shrinking fat cells is phenomenal. Visually, it's stunning. When you're killing fat cells, you're looking at 6 months to a year before you really see that result.
Yeah.
The cool thing is the result can be almost near permanent. They had this really cool paper where they actually performed the treatment on one love handle, and then years later looked at the guys in the trial and they still just had one big, one small love handle, which is fairly cool. To your point being that it takes a lot to get those fat cells to add number, right? It has to be sort of a big weight gain. So these guys sort of stayed weight neutral, and that weird fat placement maintained. So it's going to be a stunning area of growth. And the reason I'm really happy with it is because it's non-surgical. So you don't have the inherent risks of being cut open, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then what would be really cool is when we combine that with things like fasting, where we're killing off fat cells as well as shrinking fat cells, maybe can like at the same time, and what kind of effect that will have. So whole new frontier is coming.
It's going to be amazing. We're all going to look lean and sexy for the rest of our lives, and we're going to live long lives, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of, fat loss, I've heard of women complain more about gaining, I don't know, midlife weight around their midsection than men. Is it that women are more vocal and they take care more of their health, or is it actually true that women are gaining more weight?
Oh, I think it's true. They're gaining more weight as a ratio or percentage to their total body size. So you imagine a guy in university, he's a 6'2" athlete, right? So he's a big man, he's fairly well muscled, and he meets this beautiful girl. She's 5'4", maybe not quite as athletic, right? Still in great shape. And they start dating, and they get married. Now, as part of the fact that they're married, they hang out a lot, right? So that's what married people do. And they go to a restaurant and they both order the same meal. So she is 5'4", he is 6'2". They have astoundingly different muscle masses, astoundingly different metabolic rates, but the exact same amount of food. They both go to Subway and get a sub, same amount of food, right? You normalize what you eat to the people around you, right? You and I hang out all the time. We're grabbing cookies. I might grab 4 cookies. You might grab 4 cookies eventually, right? Like you normalize.
Yeah.
The difference being is that on the gentleman, adding 10 pounds of body fat may be barely noticeable, right? Let's say he's 6'2", 220. He's athletic and he got to 230. He might have blurry abs. Now she's much smaller and she gains 10 pounds of body fat. It is noticeable. It's also noticeable because of the fact that the way social norms are, at least in North America, right? He's either in a suit or a hoodie, right? Where she has to wear the clothing that most women wear. So I think it's as a ratio to their body weight, to the beginning body weight, they gain more in that regard. I think the more is less forgiving. And I think it's more difficult to lose weight. When you go off of the old eat 6 meals a day idea, I remember working out I could basically eat 6-inch subs a day.
6.
And yeah, like it was something real. I think that worked out to like 2,400 calories or something like that. I'd have to do the exact math. But then, a 5'1" woman with comparatively less body mass, it was like half a cup of yogurt and half a banana 6 times a day. Like it's not filling. It's not fair, right? So I think combine that with the possible hormonal implications just of being a middle-aged woman, et cetera. I think it's not unfair to say it's more difficult. That's for sure.
That's a really good way to put it. I've never actually thought about that. Now, I have read research where if all your friends are bigger than you, then you tend to normalize and become more, you gain more weight because you just become like the people you hang around. And so if I use that and I hang out with Brad all the time, I'm going to get ripped and look really cool. Have the physique. The physique that I've always wanted, huh? Okay, so let's touch on women. You touched on women and their hormones, Brad. Is there any credence to this idea that women shouldn't fast any more than 12 to 14 hours because of their daily circadian rhythms are different than men?
Yeah, no, my personal opinion on that is I remember when that came out. I know the website that started that. If I'm being honest, I feel it was a bit of a hit piece. I think it was a group who did not like the trend of intermittent fasting or the trend of CrossFit and decided to start taking shots at both of them. And they started on that idea and then they ran with it. Now, there is a trial on women with unbelievably low levels of body fat. I think they were averaging like 11%. So like your cross-country runner would be the best sort of example because they weren't fitness athletes, right? So it wasn't, low body fat and high body mass sort of thing. These were just very small people. And they found that those women, when fasting for, I want to say 36 hours plus, maybe it was 48, somewhere along there, after a certain amount of time, did start to see some menstrual irregularities, right? But these were college-age women with a DEXA at 11% body fat. Like that is, leaner than me half the time. Like that's a lean woman. So it begs the question then, to me, there is a point where there are people out there who shouldn't be fasting that regularly or that long. I think that we can make sort of some common sense logical assumptions where the leaner you are, the lower the duration, or at least the lower frequency of your fasts, right? Mm-hmm. And the less lean you are, the more you can up that because you have those stores. If you don't have stores of body fat to use as a fuel, then maybe going extreme time without fuel is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. So I think that the whole push for fasting not being great for women, even though I think that the initial writings were with not the best intent, I think you can flip it and definitely say we learned something from it. And it really made us question, no diet is great for everyone. Mm-hmm. And should people who are extremely lean fast for extended periods of time? And the answer is probably not. At least if your goal is fat loss and if you tend to want to do this continually, right? So are you very, very lean and you'd like to try a 72-hour fast, but you want to do it once a year? That makes more sense than being, I'm very, very lean. I want to fast daily, right? So at some point, a little bit of common sense helps.
I got you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to move on to the next myth, but before I do that, I wanted to come back to this. I've recently had a friend who got bariatric surgery. I believe she was 39 when she got it, and she stayed lean, but she's in Facebook groups with thousands and thousands of men and women. The women obviously are chatting more on Facebook. Men are just kind of lurking. But they're all like we do, right? Just kind of check it out and leave. And these women, a lot of them are getting, thousands of them at a time are getting bariatric surgery. They're saving up, and some of them are going to Mexico because it's cheaper.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. But so I asked her, so what do you see in a year or 2 years? She goes, in 3 months, a dramatic weight reduction because you just can't eat. Right.
Yep.
But within 18 months, they're back to their old weight, which I'm like, you spent thousands of dollars. You spent months of your life not eating properly. You spent, you just stressed out your body. You had a surgery and now you're back to it in 18 months. What is the point? Yep. But I think that society, people just want the quick hit. They just want to see massive changes. And over time, they just normalize back to their old behavior.
I would say that from my experience, after doing this for way too long, there are very, very, very few people who want to lose weight. They want to weigh less, right? I want to weigh less. I don't want to go through the process of losing weight because it is a change to the way you live. And a lot of the changes may be far beyond what you perceive. And then we can get into that with when we talk about like heat, temperature, and the environment. But everything from if you live in a downtown city core, those pollutants you're breathing in from all the automobiles may have an effect. CO2 levels in your office or school may have an effect, right? The temperature that you live in on a daily basis may have an effect. But then you flip it from there and say, like we just talked about, the friends you hang out with may have an effect, right? If you go out with your friends every Tuesday and Thursday night for wings while you do trivia night at a local bar, and that's your life, at some point, being social and doing trivia is going to be more important than having abs, right? And so you've got all these environmental facts, all these social facts, and then you have just the massive drive to eat because you can get food anywhere for a relatively decent price, right? So it is a very, I'm going to say very about 1,000 more times on this. It's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to maintain because there's so many factors at play. And you are currently told in health nutrition that this is just a game of willpower. And if you're overweight, it's because you're weak. You don't want it bad enough, right? And then to be told that over and over again, lose weight and then gain it back. Well, your only possible explanation is that you're just too weak and you don't have the willpower. So if you're weak and don't have the willpower, why even bother? And that's the problem with our current massive emphasis on the nutrition side of weight loss, instead of looking at all the other parts of your life that have to be intervened on at the same time. And then it's up to you as an individual to be like, shit, is that worth it? Or shoot, is that worth it? Right? Like, do I want to be lean that badly to change my life this dramatically? And I think the bariatric surgery people are a great example where they want it bad enough. They're willing to save up that level of money and go a very invasive medical procedure. And then to your point, only to see it disappear in a couple of years. So it is a very complex problem that we're trying to solve still with very barbaric solutions, right? You're either cutting the fat out or you're starving yourself. And I think that they all play a role, but I think that you need to look at them probably together with multiple other interventions to make it stick.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to settle on the debate with bariatric surgery and liposuction, bariatric surgery, I would recommend if you're considering it, don't do it because the chances of, if you just look at the statistics, they're not very good in 18 months, 2 years out, right? I think what's way more effective, let me touch on liposuction. Liposuction is a more effective procedure because it sucks the fat cells out, but it's very invasive and it costs a lot of money. And as Brad said, we are going to talk about interventions that you could do daily or weekly, and also some longer term new things that are coming out, which we'll talk in a future episode, where we can start to kill some of these fat cells. So with that said, Brad, let's talk about muscle. Like I hear this so much. People, men, gym rats, bodybuilders, even regular men that are not working out that much, they worry about fasting because they're going to lose muscle mass. They're like, wow. Like that's one question. The second one, if I fast, I can't lift my regular weights. I can't go hard enough. I can't go strong enough. I need food to go to the gym. So there's a lot of myths around working out and muscle mass and fasting. So could you just talk about some of the things you've learned?
Yeah, we have muscle has a whole dogma and whole psychology behind it, right? And the idea that you need to eat massive amounts of food to gain muscle is one that's not going to go away, but not entirely true. If you think about when we can gain a lot of muscle, is basically puberty. Yes, we do eat a lot during puberty, typically. We're also growing in height, which is incredibly metabolically demanding, right? But past that, muscle mass is just muscle building, incredibly slow process, right? So if you were able to gain massive amounts of muscle in a short period of time, you would need to eat a lot, but you don't. And a lot of what people see is these giant fluctuations on a scale and decide they look a bit better, so it must be muscle. But in reality, muscle growth is a slow process that for any adult is determined primarily by the amount of work you put in to building that muscle, with the exception of like any pharmacological steroid interventions, right? But rule those out. It's just sort of work and the kind of genetics you have behind you. And you just got to go with that. And then in terms of does being fed or not fed affect your ability to do that work? That's mostly mental. And I really take the view that anybody who's an athlete should train fasted occasionally because it gets rid of that athletic crutch of I didn't have exactly 1/2 chicken breast plus 3 ounces of gnocchi before my event, and therefore I'm not going to do well. You should basically be able to train at a high level fasted, and then okay, if I can do it fasted, I can do it fed, right? But I don't think you need the food, massive amounts of calories to get the work done you want to get done. The other thing I find really fascinating about muscle building, and I'm going to use more sort of superhero analogies. I think we should think of it more as a Captain America process, right? There is normal you, then there's weight trained you. And weight trained you is going to be much more muscular than normal you. But once you've attained that level, you're probably not going very far beyond it. And so what you start to see is diminishing returns, right? So yes, you ate more calories and you ate more protein and you put on 12, 15 pounds of muscle, right? So you were 5'10" and you were 160 pounds and now you're 5'10", 175. What got you there is not going to get you past there. So if you just keep eating more calories and more protein, you're not going to eventually be 5'10" and 230 pounds with no body fat, right? There's a limit to it. Once you've hit that Captain America version of you, that more muscular version, then that's when you can switch gears. I don't think you need massive amounts of protein your whole life if you've already done that building. You need a bit more to maintain it, maybe. Absolutely. And maybe slightly infinitesimal amounts of extra calories to maintain that muscle mass. I mean, it's ridiculously low. So, your basic extra glass of milk is almost the calorie needs you need on a daily basis to maintain a large amount of extra muscle mass, right? Because muscle's not liver and heart and lungs, these like highly metabolic lean tissues. Muscle is fairly boring. It actually doesn't burn that many calories when you're sitting around at rest, right? So you don't need a ton to support it. So my view is if you're that concerned, if muscle mass is that important to you, then you know what? Take 4, 5, 6 months, don't fast. Focus purely on building muscle. And then when you've stopped building muscle, then it's time to be like, okay, now I'm just going to maintain this and I can fast and I can reduce the calories I'm eating. And I will just make sure I keep my workouts up so I don't lose the muscle mass. Mm-hmm. And if you somehow got to a point where you were squatting 300 pounds and then you lose weight and you're still squatting 300 pounds, but you think somehow you've lost muscle, well, then somehow you've made better muscle, right? So you're fine. So, but yeah, I think that the concern over muscle is overrated in terms of being concerned about losing it. I don't think muscle itself is overrated. I think it's good to have, but I do also think we have to be realistic about the diminishing returns. And once you've kind of hit your Captain America version of you, then tearing your body down and potentially damaging yourself by the calorie intake you're following in order to possibly gain another half pound of muscle, which may or may not show or even make a difference in how you look, seems counterproductive to longevity and a good lifestyle for me. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that answer. And since you brought up muscle building, let's dive into that rabbit hole with one more question. I was going to ask about protein, right? The questions are, what type of exercise? Like, can I work out while I'm fasted? And then how much protein do I need every single day? Yeah, these are you get these. So as you're building muscle, Brad, let's say, like you just said, 4 to 6 months, you go crazy. Like you're going to build your Captain America version of you.
Yep.
How much muscle protein do you need every day? How much?
Okay. So and this gets really moving goalposts, happens to me all the time on this one, specifically for muscle building. For an average person, so let's say you're below 6'2", I'm going to use imperial, right? So you're in that normal distribution of height. Mm-hmm. It's probably somewhere in the 100 grams of protein range, right? Maybe 120. Now, more isn't going to detrimentally affect your muscle building, and less might, right? So if you're like not comfortable with that number, Brad saying 100, I might go 150. It's not 300 or 400 grams. Right. And people get obsessed about it. Then when I say that, people bring up, yeah, but 300 or 400 grams of protein is great for satiety. I'm like, great, but we're specifically talking muscle building. So just muscle building, and muscle building not on an 800 calorie a day diet, but muscle building where you're roughly at maintenance. Right. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's much more because, again, what we talked about, muscle grows very slowly. Muscle is almost like a water balloon. It's protein holding together a scaffolding of a bunch of water, right? Like if you're really concerned about building muscle and adding muscle weight in what you eat, it was almost like you should drink more water because that's what this is all made of, right? Yeah. So if you just need a little bit of protein to build that scaffolding, and let's say you need a bit more protein in a meal to initiate the process of building muscle, all those protein signaling molecules in your body that they respond to leucine, one of the amino acids, et cetera. So you need a bit more from that. But the idea that you need copious amounts for the rest of your life just seems ridiculous. I mean, it's a great thing to say if you're on steroids and being asked how you built all that muscle. You say chicken, rice, and broccoli every meal, right? Like it's that standard Hollywood answer. But for most of us, it's probably around 100 grams. Now, if you're listening to this and going, that's BS, I'm a 6'5" athlete, I need more. Well, you're a bigger human being, right? So if you are large enough that you know you're big, right? You're the tallest of all your friends, right? You take up a lot of space, you're going to need more food. But you can also just accept the fact that, well, everyone has a tall friend. Not every one of us is that tall friend. So if you're 5'10", 5'9", so if you're average North American, you're just not going to have the same amount of muscle mass as your 6'5" buddy. In fact, you could work out for years and your 6'5" buddy could never, ever work out and be what you would consider to be like rail skinny, like supermodel thin, as probably still has more actual lean mass than you. It's just spread over a bigger canvas. And so for the average person, yeah, it's probably not much more than 100 grams. And if you want to err more on the side of caution, because that's what most of the research in the area does, they're like, well, it's probably roughly 100, but in order to be safe, we'll jump a couple standard deviations and tell you a much higher number, right? Mm-hmm. But it's probably not that high. And then my biggest concern is, right back to what we talked about earlier, if you use the Captain America paradigm, okay, it's fine. You want to build a ton of muscle, take a year in your 20s and eat 200 grams of protein. Build all the muscle you want, but you're going to hit a point where you're not building more muscle. So why are you still eating more protein? Mm-hmm. And it's just because I'm used to it, or because I'm afraid I want to lose this muscle, right? Or no, I still think something I'm going to finally do in my workouts is going to be different. And I'm going to gain that 30 extra pounds of muscle I've been chasing for 25 years, which just isn't going to happen, right? To blame your parents, but you have your Captain America version of you and your non-Captain America, and you just want to be Captain America as long as possible, right? But, Chris Evans isn't going to turn into Chris Hemsworth, right? Like from an example from using one guy is just significantly taller than the other, mm-hmm. and just a bit more muscular. So the protein is essential to the muscle building process. It is very important during the times of high growth. And then it's up to you to be honest whether you're in a period of high growth or not. And if you're not, it's probably just extra protein.
Yeah, I think that the listeners of this podcast, at least, and anybody past 35 that's built the muscle, as you said, just wants to kind of maintain the muscle man, have functional movement, be able to lift enough weight that they can go about their lives and just look sexy naked, right? It's like, that's part of the thing. You don't want to.
You don't want to look gold. That's the main thing, right?
Right.
I like to think of it too, I enjoy Hollywood. I enjoy Hollywood actors. I enjoy watching their body transformations. You have to wonder if some of their amazing transformations have to do with the fact that they get in shape for a movie, they look amazing, then they don't do anything for 2 years, then they get in shape for a movie again and look even better. Mm-hmm. It's becoming less rare, but typically it was pretty rare for one of these, male Hollywood celebrities to stay in superhero shape year round.
Right.
And then you wonder if maybe even doing that was detrimental to that last little push of extra muscle they could get. So, if you want to jack up your protein for a month or two every year or so, go for it. I just don't see any value in 300-400 grams of protein every day if your goal is muscle building, but you're not in fact muscle building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So let's come back to most people, which are just maintaining muscle, right?
Yeah.
When they fast, use the eat, stop, eat model. Yep. How can they effectively save the muscle mass when they're fasting one or two days a week?
Oh, okay. So super simple. Is the most potent stimulus to maintain and preserve your muscle mass is to use that muscle mass. It's as simple as that. So if you are an athlete who likes to rock climb and you like to run and you occasionally lift weights, then rock climb, run, and occasionally lift weights. Just do the stuff you normally do to challenge your muscles. And then your body recognizes that this stuff is doing a job. I need it. Mm-hmm. It's there. Right? If you want to lose muscle, just stop doing that stuff. Similar to a kid who's broken his arm and had that arm in a cast, it doesn't matter what that kid is eating. That arm is smaller. And then it doesn't matter what that kid is eating. Once that cast is off, that arm grows back to this, actually grows a bit past the size it was, and then it shrinks back down to match the arm. Interventions on casting body parts, similar to, probably all of our experiences, either with ourselves or our kids, is that a muscle that's not being used will shrink. It's not needed, Why is it there? I want to get rid of it. And there's not much you can do to prevent a child in a casted leg or casted arm from losing that mass, right? The best thing you can do is get that cast off as early as possible and start getting that arm mobile again. So you want to do the same thing. Then the only other thing is you do eat, stop, eat. And so with eat, stop, eat, the fast is once, maybe twice a week for 24 hours. The rest of that time, you're eating normally. So you've taken dieting and condensed it into 2 small windows, maybe in 1 small window. And the rest of that time, you're eating really close to maintenance. You're not starving the muscles. You're not starving your body. You're getting the nutrients you need. You're getting the protein you need. So whatever small deficit may have occurred in muscle mass in that 24 hours of fasting is made up by the other hundreds of hours of not fasting, is the way I like to think of it, right? So you already know, okay, wait, with fasting itself, I'm probably not losing muscle mass. And I'm resistance training on top of it. So that helps. And on the times I'm not fasting, I'm getting that 100 grams of protein, like Brad said. Like, your bases are pretty much covered.
Awesome.
And then it's just consistency, making sure that you're lifting with the same level of challenge to those muscles now as you did 10 years ago. And you plan on lifting that same level of intensity 10 years from now. And that's what maintains the muscle mass as best you can against gravity and time.
Gotcha. Fantastic. So work out like you would, don't eat for the 1 or 2 days of the week that you're doing this. Yep. And then the other days, just eat your regular, meaning don't eat surplus because you've fasted the last 24 hours. Like the fast
never happened.
Yeah.
The minute you're done that fast, out of your head, eat the way you normally would, responsibly like an adult, not a kid after Halloween. Then you're good. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So in terms of people being able to follow this, right? The biggest thing that I've seen in the dieting world is you can't consistently do the ketogenic diet for the rest of your life. It's just not possible, right? You want to eat a piece of cake. We're humans. Something will happen. And so you'll get off. And then once you get off, you're off for months. And then you're back to the old self. And so what I love about your approach and fasting in general is that it just becomes part of your lifestyle. And that's what you do. And it's super flexible. You talk about this in the book too.
Yeah.
You have a kid's birthday on the day that you fast. Well, just push the fast out a day.
Yeah,
no big deal.
Don't skip the birthday. Don't be that person. Yes. No, right. Absolutely.
And so what are you seeing in terms of people being able to follow this lifestyle on a long-term basis?
I think that what people find is with fasting, when you get a couple in where you say, okay, I am fasting until tomorrow at 2, and you fast until tomorrow at 2, you've won. You're done. It's over. You did it. It's positive reinforcement. You could probably do it again. Now, if you don't do that and you fast for as long as you can fast, what happens is you ultimately fail, right? Because then you start eating because you're eventually going to eat. And that's this weird negative reinforcement. And I think most diets are based on negative reinforcement because you can't do them forever unless you're, let's say, an athlete who competes, like a fitness model, where there's a date where you stop. For most people, it stops when you go to that child's birthday party or that wedding and you're like, I blew it. It's over. It's done. Right. So it's a negative reinforcement. Then every time you diet, you know, ultimately you're going to stop when you fail. So what I really liked about fasting is that you stop when you're done. And it's positive reinforcement. Not everyone's going to fast the rest of their lives, but I think they take that positive reinforcement through the rest of their life, right? So knowing if they want to, they can take a break, right? If they have to skip lunch or move lunch from noon to 2, it's not the end of the world. I always find it funny when, let's say you and I are going for lunch at noon and I call you up and I'm like, I can't make it, let's do 2. And you're like, yeah, no problem, lunch at 2. Then you think, I should eat something to tide myself over. We're still eating the same amount. We're going to the same restaurant, ordering the same food, a little time gap. And you think, I should grab a muffin, a 500 calorie muffin from the Starbucks to tide me over. Right. Whereas I think part of the lesson for me to stop eat is you realizing, I can wait till 2. Not that hungry. I can do this. Right. Brad's buying because he made me late, but I can wait till 2.
Yeah.
I think that's the major lesson from fasting is that learning that, you can eat when you want to. And sometimes when you want to eat, if it doesn't happen, you can handle a little bit of flux there. You can be flexible.
Yeah, I love that. It's the food's there. Don't try to, like you said, pass the time and eat a 500 calorie meal. Like this happens in the weightlifting or guys that are trying to build muscle community as well. Because they're like, I need the protein 15 minutes after I finish my workout. So they bring these workout shakes in their car. And when they get back in the car, they're just like guzzling it, right? So you can wait. Like there's no study that says you have to have protein like right after you work out, right? The anabolic window lasts for a while. Okay, so let's get into couple other things. The other question I get, Brad, is that, or people I see online as well, is hypoglycemia and why I get hypoglycemics, therefore I can't fast. Like it's a problem for me. My blood glucose drops too much. And, 5 other reasons behind it. What's your response and how much of that do you think is valid? And how do you address this
people
question?
who say that aren't hypoglycemic. It's the oddest thing. If you measure their blood sugar just with a prick and doing the blood, it's probably in the normal range. But this is the weird part. It doesn't mean they're lying. They're definitely feeling something, right? So it could be blood pressure. It could be just the lack of familiarity with the feeling of being fasted, right? It could be something learned. Maybe you were always told if you don't eat, you're going to feel faint. But whatever it is, they're not lying. They're experiencing that feeling, but rarely is it blood glucose. So it's a trick for me because I don't want to say it's not a thing because it's definitely a thing. In general, my favorite thing is those glucometers that diabetics use. I mean, you can get that at almost any pharmacy for 30, 40 bucks. I mean, I'm pretty sure the next Apple iWatch is going to have some sort of way to measure blood glucose, right? So if you're really concerned about it, I promise you that the pinprick on your finger doesn't hurt that much. Measure it. That's what I did. We did when I first came out with ESOP. I was doing Krav Maga, and we were doing like hardcore 24 hours into a fast, hardcore sparring. And I would take a break, go to the bathroom, take the finger, be like, okay, nope, still good. Go back out, get my butt kicked a bit more, come back in, check it. Like, okay, still good. Like, what's going on? And then like driving home, being like, okay, I'm feeling a little tired, a little bit woozy. Pull over, check it. I'm like, shit, still good. So there's a lot of things that can make you feel that way. And for the odd person, it will be blood glucose. But for the majority of us, I don't know what it is, but it's not blood glucose.
Okay, fantastic. And so last question about the fast in particular, and then we'll get to some of the other stuff you're doing. So to summarize, Brad's protocol is once a week for 24 hours, you fast completely, or twice a week if you can. And you should read the book because the book is just full of all the information. You get all the myths broken down. I don't have a time or chance to go into all of these things. There's just so much. And I loved reading your book, Brad.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So in terms of, I guess let's move on to what you're doing because people can always go back and read the book. I know that I recently learned that you are vegan. And so I want to talk about, there's a whole new set of questions that come with fasting, workouts, and just being vegan in general, right? So what can you talk to us about how you've changed your workouts or fasting regimens to deal with you being vegan?
Oh, well, it's a super boring answer. I haven't changed anything at all. So about 6 years ago, I've always been interested in veganism as an ideology, not as a health thing, but just as if I can opt out of eating animals, then maybe I should. And my concern was always my muscle mass, right? Which is incredibly vain now that I say that out loud, but that was my concern. And it became kind of, okay, well, hold on. Like we have this abundance of nutrition information at our fingertips. We have protein shakes and we have Beyond Meat burgers and we have beans and lentils. Like we have protein sources. That's not the issue. Is it a bit of an inconvenience going to a restaurant? Yeah, it might be, but let's try it out. And worst case scenario, give me something to write about. Best case scenario, it fits. And what I found is it fit my lifestyle really, really well. And it wasn't a health thing, but really just if I have the option not to eat animals, I'm going to choose not to. Let's see what happens. And it started to fit. Workouts didn't change. Kept the fasting going. I have access to a DEXA machine. So that's a shout out to Bone Wellness Clinic in Toronto because they're awesome people and they let me get in there. And muscle mass wasn't changing. I'm like, all right, I'll get my blood done, I guess. Got my blood done. Nothing was different. Nothing was better, but nothing was worse. So what I thought was like, obviously the effects of being vegan must take longer. So I did that for a couple of years. To the point I'm like, okay, nothing changes. Like my muscle mass goes down a bit if I stop working out. It goes up a bit if I start working out really hard. My fat mass goes down a bit if it's getting the summer and I fast a bit more often, and it goes up a bit during winter when I just don't care. But none of it seemed related to the vegan part. So it just stuck. I don't think it gave me superpowers by any means. I mean, I'm a bit more conceited than everybody, but like, no crazy superpowers. It makes ordering at restaurants harder, but each and passing year, it's gotten easier and easier. And it's one of those things where if it's an option, why not take it? So that's what I've done. And then if in 50 years from now I still look like I'm 45, then it helped. And if not, I contributed to the death of a few less animals, right? So it was interesting. It was the first time that my eating was an ethical choice in any way. And no, a moral choice, because morals are internal, right? So it was just me thinking, Brad Pilon doesn't want to do this. I don't go out and force other people to not eat animals. I still barbecue for my kids because they're young enough that I don't know what the long-term implications are, and I'm not going to force anyone to be vegan. But I think it's an interesting lifestyle that you can definitely lead by example with, by shutting up and not talking about being vegan. And I think that helps people see that you can just make that choice as a private choice. I mean, in these days, believe it or not, you can go months and months and months without telling someone you're vegan. You can go to a restaurant and order food, no one questions it. And then if your muscle mass hasn't really changed, and that was one of my major concerns, there we go. And then, from a health point of view, if you couldn't find any major detriments, then I just didn't see a reason why not to keep it up. And every argument that's been thrown at me that this was a dumb reason, they obviously always have some sort of glimmer of possibilities. So one of the ones I hear about is that how's it go? Like more reptiles and amphibians are killed during the cultivation of rice than, it's like massive amounts. And my thought is, but if more people care about that, then that technology can be improved upon, right? You still have to kill a cow to eat a steak, right? So, and I'm not saying that everyone should therefore not eat steak. I'm just saying that kind of makes that argument less of a zero-sum argument, right? Every possible way that being vegan might contribute to more animal deaths, to me, seems like a fixable solution, that if there's more people interested in it, we get it fixed. So more of a moral decision than a health decision, but one that's kind of fit for me. So I stuck with it. Yeah,
man, whatever floats your boat. And I respect all viewpoints. I know there's no one diet for anybody. I've been in this game long enough to understand that we're all individual. And of course, if you have moral imperatives or you want to eat whatever you want to eat, that's totally up to you. I think the only thing I caution people when they get on any diet, or regular people, not people that know what they're doing, is don't go vegan and then go just eat Doritos all day long or eat a bunch of processed foods, right? Because that's harmful for you, regardless of what diet you're on.
Regardless. So the other thing is, don't go vegan and eat nothing but vegetables, because what everyone does, and then I get the same, like, my stomach hurts and I stink up a room. I'm like, dude, vegan is more than broccoli and cauliflower. Like, just come on, have some fruit or something, right? But so don't eat all Doritos, but don't be crazy health food vegan either and eat all broccoli and cauliflower every day, all day. Just neither one's great.
Yeah. So I guess last question on the vegan is, in terms of protein, I know there's so many ways you could get protein. You could get lentils, you could get beans, you could get tempeh. And I regularly eat all of those. And for me, like beans and lentils, I soak them because a lot of people complain that they have lectins and other irritants that in the gut that cause problems. And so I soak my lentils for 12 hours at a minimum before I cook them. Is how do you combine and get, let's just say you want 100 grams of protein, right?
Yeah.
Is there a certain way you break it up, and what tips could you give people?
For one part, pre-vegan, I like my protein shakes. I just found the convenience. So vegan, I just switched brands. It was as simple as, instead of adding the cart, this one, I added the cart Vega and done. Right. So, and that was always that wasn't a new thing with vegans. So I'm like, I'm cool with this. And then I find black beans go well with a ton of dishes. I find that chickpeas go well. I like tofu. I'm not afraid of soy. And you can do so many fun, it's a very versatile food product that you can use in a lot of dishes, right? So anything from that, like edamame is a great snack, right? So you just find a way. It involves eating differently, but if you're doing vegan as your normal diet minus meat and dairy products, you're missing a whole world, right? So it's like, okay, what are the foods I'm missing I haven't been eating? But getting to 100 on a normal non-fasted day is pretty easy. And then on a fasted day, I throw in a shake at the end of the fast or somewhere after the fast, and that makes it work. So it's just a little bit of extra flexibility that way. But tempeh, tofu, beans, lentils, I like them soaked too. Mostly because I also don't like them when they're like crunchy. You know, you get that undercooked lentil and just ruins a dish.
Oh yeah.
And then I think what you forget is that like breads, potatoes, they have protein in them as well. It's not massive amounts, but it can add up to an extra 10, 15 in a dish, right? So if you're getting, 10 from some black beans and then another 10 from some potato, like it all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's a really good mixed meal and I still hit 30 grams of protein. There you go. So yeah, it's counting all the sources, right? And it's getting rid of the idea that the only thing that contains protein is steak, chicken, and fish. Right. That kind of old way of thinking, but looking at all your dishes being like, there's more in there than I thought. And when it's all combined, it counts.
Yeah. It just takes a little bit planning for you to figure out what you can eat. And then it's not hard to switch. And so that's cool. And anybody that says, that being vegan doesn't mean you're going to have as much muscle or you're not going to be as ripped. Take a look at Brad on Instagram. Like his physique's on point. Like this man is doing something. It's
not massive. And you know what? You could even make the argument that Brad, your 170 pictures that if you ate a ton of meat, you'd be 174, right? And in the grand scheme for me, I'm like, I'm fine with the way I look, right? So if it was a big concern, we'd have issues. But yeah, it's definitely possible to build a good amount of muscle or at least maintain it. So yeah.
Fantastic. And thank you, Brad, for coming on. Like these are some of the core pillars like anti-aging, working out, of a longevity lifestyle, and fasting and working out are very important for the longevity lifestyle. And so I'm glad you're able to share some of this. Your book, as I said, you're one of the OGs, and I highly recommend people get this book and read it. Where can they get the book?
Oh, Eat.Beats at eat.beat.com, Amazon.com, and my blog, bradpilon.com. So realistically, Eat.Beat.com and Amazon.com, best place for the books. And then just bradpilon.com if you're, you just want to learn more about my views on things. It's all written down there in some form.
Yeah, I got the book at eat.com, so people can check it out there. Brad, I know you wrote a different book on heat, and we don't have time to get into it, but I'll schedule something else for next year, and we'll talk about how your latest research on heat. So yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Brad, for coming on. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.